Janet Jackson had always carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from within. She was a woman who knew her worth, and it showed in the way she walked, the way she spoke, and the way she handled herself in even the most challenging situations. On this particular morning, she found herself in the affluent neighborhood of Crestwood Heights, a predominantly white area in the heart of Springfield, Illinois. Janet had just finished a meeting with a client and decided to stop by a local coffee shop to grab a latte before heading back to her office. She parked her sleek black BMW outside the cafe, the morning sun glinting off its polished surface, and settled into the driver's seat to enjoy her drink. As she sipped her coffee, Janet couldn't help but notice the curious glances from passersby. Crestwood Heights wasn't a place where many people who looked like her were seen, at least not in the eyes of some of its residents. But Janet wasn't one to let the stares of strangers unsettle her. She had worked too hard and come too far to be intimidated by anyone. Her tailored navy blue suit and the air of authority she carried were a testament to her success and the respect she had earned in her field. Unbeknownst to Janet, her presence had also caught the attention of Officer Daniel Harris, a veteran of the Springfield Police Department with a reputation for being brash and overbearing. Harris had been patrolling the neighborhood when he spotted Janet's car. To him, the sight of a black woman in a luxury vehicle in this part of town was enough to raise suspicion. His mind immediately jumped to conclusions, fueled by the biases he had carried for years. Without a second thought, he pulled his patrol car up behind Janet's BMW and stepped out, his hand resting on his holster as he approached her. "License and registration," Harris barked, his tone sharp and demanding as he leaned down to peer through the driver's side window. Janet turned her head slowly, her expression calm but slightly puzzled. She had been lost in thought, enjoying the quiet moment, and hadn't noticed the officer approaching. "Good morning, officer," she said politely, her voice steady. "May I ask why you're stopping me?" Harris's jaw tightened at her response. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by someone like her. "Don't play games with me," he snapped. "Hand over your license and registration, now." Janet hesitated for a moment, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the situation. She hadn't been speeding, hadn't run a stop sign, hadn't done anything to warrant being pulled over. But she knew better than to argue with an officer in the heat of the moment. Without a word, she reached into her glove compartment and retrieved the requested documents, handing them over to Harris. The officer glanced at the papers, but barely took the time to read them. His focus was on asserting his authority, on making it clear who was in charge. "Step out of the car," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. 2 days later, the case was scheduled for a hearing. News of Janet's arrest had spread like wildfire, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and curious locals. Officer Harris strutted in confidently, his chest puffed out with the certainty that the judge would side with him, as they often did. He had no doubt that his version of events would be accepted without question. Janet, on the other hand, walked into the courtroom with a quiet confidence that immediately caught everyone's attention. Dressed in a sharp gray suit, she carried herself with an air of authority that made even the judge sit up straighter. She took her seat at the defendant's table, her expression calm and composed. As the proceedings began, Harris's lawyer painted a picture of a disruptive and suspicious individual who had refused to cooperate with law enforcement. He described Janet as a threat to public safety, someone who had no business being in Crestwood Heights. Harris smirked as he listened, confident that the narrative would stick. When it was Janet's turn to speak, she stood up and addressed the court. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and steady, "before I defend myself, I would like to introduce myself properly." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a badge, holding it up for everyone to see. "My name is Janet Jackson, and I am the Chief Federal Prosecutor for the Central District of Illinois." The courtroom fell silent. Harris's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of shock and fear. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by this unexpected turn of events. Janet continued, her tone firm but measured. "Officer Harris violated my rights, falsely arrested me, and used unnecessary force. I have spent my career fighting for justice, and I will not tolerate such behavior from those sworn to uphold the law. Harris's lawyer stammered, trying to regain control of the narrative, but it was too late. Janet presented evidence, video footage from bystanders, her spotless record, and even testimonies from witnesses who had seen the incident unfold. The judge listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence. When Janet finished, the judge turned to Harris. "Officer Harris, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Harris stumbled over his words, his confidence shattered. I didn't know who she was," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "And that excuses your actions?" the judge retorted, his voice cold. "Ignorance is no defense." The judge wasted no time delivering his verdict. "Officer Harris, your actions were not only unprofessional but also discriminatory. This court holds you accountable for your abuse of power." He announced Harris's punishment: immediate suspension without pay, mandatory sensitivity training, and an internal investigation into his conduct. But Janet wasn't done. She stood up once more and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I request that a formal review of Officer Harris's past arrests be conducted. If he has treated others the way he treated me, there may be a pattern of abuse." The judge agreed, ordering a full investigation. Harris's career was effectively over, his reputation in tatters. As Janet walked out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed her, eager for a statement. She paused and looked directly into the cameras. "Justice isn't just about punishment," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "It's about accountability. No one is above the law, not even those who enforce it." Her words quickly became a rallying cry for justice reform, inspiring countless others to stand up against abuse of power. Janet Jackson had shown that justice, when wielded by the right hands, was swift and unyielding. Meanwhile, Harris sat in the courtroom, his head in his hands. He had thought he could get away with his actions, but in just a few minutes, his world had crumbled. Janet Jackson had proven that no one was untouchable, and that justice would always prevail.